classroom culture. This dimension focuses on what the teacher does to establish a classroom culture that is mutually respectful, collaborative, and consistently represented by students who are authentically engaged in learning and where their social, emotional needs are met. Classroom culture is the last of the three dimensions in the learning environment domain, Dimension 3.3. The definition states that the teacher leads a mutually respectful and collaborative class of actively engaged learners. Teachers with effective classroom culture focus on a learning environment that is structured both physically and culturally so that it is conducive to teaching and learning. What does the research say about classroom culture? Take a minute to read through this citation. It is clear from this and other research that the teacher plays a critical role in setting the tone for classroom culture and students' perceptions. In continuing to make connections, we know that the Texas Teacher Standards provide the basis for the T-test dimensions. Let's look at the connections with the standards to classroom culture. The first connection is that teachers create a mutually respectful, collaborative, and safe community of learners by using knowledge of students' development and backgrounds. The next standard states that teachers maintain and facilitate respectful, supportive, positive, and productive interactions with and among students. Teachers also maintain a strong culture of individual and group accountability for class expectations. Teachers cultivate student ownership in developing classroom culture and norms. And finally, teachers maintain a culture that is based on high expectations for student performance and encourages students to be self-motivated, taking responsibility for their own learning. A question then becomes, in what ways are these standards reflected in what you see with classroom culture in classrooms in your school? There are 5 simple questions to assess teacher-student relationships and classroom culture. The first question is, do I believe in the students? In order for teachers to effectively teach and inspire students, they have to believe in them. The second question is, do I know the students? This focuses on the teacher's relationship with students. The third question is, do I care about the students? This is centered around the teacher's care, concern, and compassion for students. The fourth question is, do I provide the students with an environment of excellence? This question focuses on the classroom environment that the teacher has created and how it's conducive to learning. And the last question is, do I realize who my students are? This last question focuses on culturally responsive teaching and learning, meaning that the teacher takes into account who the students are historically and culturally. A classroom culture of trust and acceptance is the foundation for establishing an environment in which students are empowered and comfortable with, first, providing feedback to continuously improve classroom teaching and learning, next, learning from mistakes to enhance achievement, and also setting goals to maximize their own potential. Looking at culture from a classroom perspective, positive classrooms are essential in order to increase student engagement, create a safe discursive environment, and encourage student collaboration and participation. Remember that people support what they help create, so how are students involved in helping create this classroom culture? The old adage holds true. Students won't care about what you know until they know that you care. Taking this to the practical level, let's look at the T-test rubric and clarify the descriptors from the proficient to distinguished performance levels. For the first continuum of descriptors, teachers consistently ensure that all learning experiences are designed and delivered in a manner that is connected with students' interests and abilities, making learning relevant and meaningful. The classroom conveys a culture for high expectations for student performance and encourages students to be self-motivated, connected to learning, and assuming responsibility for their own learning, particularly at the accomplished and distinguished performance levels. For the second continuum of descriptors, creating a positive classroom climate begins with showing respect to one another. Teachers most often set this in motion when they develop a set of collaborative ground rules for their classroom and then model these for students on a regular basis. Teachers are purposeful about implementing activities where students collaborate in various group settings and structures. As a result, they provide feedback to each other and are encouraged to affirm and validate each other's efforts and achievements as a community of learners. Let's now look at the descriptors for classroom culture to clarify what we might see and hear in classrooms. The first descriptor reads, engages all students in relevant, meaningful learning. Take a minute to read through these clarifications. Based on what we read, we would see and hear that classroom instruction is authentic in nature and connected to what students bring. Teacher to student and peer-to-peer relationships and rapport are also relevant and meaningful. The second descriptor reads, students work respectfully, individually, and in groups. Take a minute to read through this clarification. This second descriptor provides the premise for student-centered instruction. It's often helpful to shuttle perspective as a means of self-assessing. Questions that teachers might ask themselves as a part of self-assessment for classroom culture include, what do students see in my classroom? What do students hear in my classroom? What do students feel in my classroom? What do students experience in my classroom? And do I provide a learning environment that fosters the proper attitude for my students' success? In order to continue developing a classroom and school community of learners, it might be helpful for teachers to ask these questions as part of a staff meeting and self-reflect with other teachers or within their team. T-test in practice is actually connected to best practices. For example, teachers lead and maintain classrooms where all students are actively engaged in learning, as evident through their level of motivation and on-task behaviors. Also, teachers maintain a culture that is based on high expectations for student performance and encourages students to be self-motivated, taking responsibility for their own learning. All interactions within and outside the classroom demonstrate caring and respect for others. And last but not least, respectful relationships are evident with all classroom interactions, teacher to student and student to student, where collaboration is encouraged, structured, and used to build relationships at all levels. How are these best practices evident in classrooms in your school? Although the T-test rubric for classroom culture may be used to generate questions using the descriptors. Some additional questions to help guide appraisers include the following. How are students empowered and expected to support a positive classroom culture? How does everyone in the classroom exhibit patience and respect with peers? What opportunities are there for students to collaborate and model expected cultural norms? And how does a culture support all students feeling comfortable sharing their thoughts, feelings, and concerns with others, including communication when there are internal struggles? The T-TESS Appraiser Guide provides additional questions to consider for both pre- and post-conferences when interacting with teachers. As we wind down this module on classroom culture, let's review some of the key points. Take a minute to read through these individually. Teachers hold the key to each respective classroom's culture. How are they supported and coached in this area in your campus? Given what was presented in this module, what are your next steps to grow, develop, and support teachers in this area? We thank you for participating with us and look forward to you joining us with the next module.